This tutorial or lecture is going to talk you through lists in Java, and it's not going to be very long, we hope. Lists are pretty much just like an array, but it can grow and shrink in size. Where in an array you had to set the size at the beginning and you can't change that, a list will grow and shrink. It still has, it's still a series or list of variables in the memory. They still share the same name, and they do have different subscripts. We access them a little bit differently though. We will show you an example in JDoodle in just a moment. In your autumn leaves project in Greenfoot, if we were to actually run that project, remember that the autumn project looks something like this, and when we clicked on the screen, it changes all of the leaves to a different image. So it captures every single leaf on that screen and then changes its image. It does that using lists. Okay, so let me pause that and go back to our slides. So in Greenfoot, the way that it does that is it uses this list, which is a special command or a special object in Greenfoot, or in Java is what it is. You have to get the leaves from the world, so you have to create an instance of the world here, and then you do world.getObjects, and then you say everything that's a leaf. So leaf.class is saying everything that's a leaf. Then it actually uses something different called a for each loop to do that processing. So here you have a for each loop, which is basically just a special for loop, and it automatically counts by 1 and processes everything in the list. So this is the code that changes all those leaves to a different image. You don't have to do a for loop, you don't have to start an index, you don't have to increment it. The for each loop does that for you. In Greenfoot, this is the same code. Don't know why I have the same code twice, but I do. So you got to see it twice. In JDoodle, this is the example that I was going to show you in JDoodle, and this one's a little bit different in that it's using an array list, which is a subset of lists. You know, with inheritance, array list is a subclass of list, so it's a special type of list. But this one is going to use strings, and you have special methods when you work with lists. You're not going to have to remember these, but just know that it's a little bit different than the regular arrays because you have to use these special commands. So you use a .add method to add names, and then you use a .get method to print them out. So .add. Now here's where you use indexing, but it's not with a square bracket, it's with a parens, and you have to use this special command called get. Now, this can get to be kind of a pain in order to process this, because you'd have to, every time you add something, you'd have to do this manually, and that's where the for each loop comes in handy. And the for each loop, every time I run this or add a new name, and if we were to jump over to JDoodle and see this in action, I think I've got it set up. I'm going to change this to a for each loop, and so that's going to be for, and I have to say for each name, string value name in my kids. Then I am going to go ahead and just print that out. System.out. And I don't have to use indexing here because the for each loop does that for me. And so it's actually going through and saying get sub 0, get sub 1, get sub 2 for 0, 1, 2. And if I were then to run this code, crossing my fingers, we don't have syntax errors, it works. But now, let's say that I were to have some more kids. So if I were to adopt, okay, we have another child. Maybe we adopt twins. Or friends. Okay. And if I execute, I don't have to change my for each loop, it processes it for me. And so that's just a nice little tool to use if you have an array list. I also want to point out you do have to make sure that you import the array list here. I don't know that you necessarily have to import list. Let me execute this as is. To use array lists, you don't have to use the list, but if you're going to actually use a straight up list, you would have to then import the list command up there. And we're getting close to getting done with this. Array lists also have a size method. So if I wanted to check the size of my list while I was working with it, if I ran this code after every time I added a child and I printed out the list size is, it automatically increments. So this is what we mean by lists being dynamic. They can grow and shrink in size. The size command is literally .size_parens. It's a method, so you have to do .size_parens. With arrays, it's .length, but with array lists, you use .size to get that. And again, copied over the other slide. I needed to change this to array lists, so please ignore that. But array lists have elements that share the same name. They share the same data type. They have different values in the subscripts. They have a length, which is stored in the size variable. And the subscripts still start at 0 when you're working with array lists. I'll change this slide before I post it online, so the slide online will be accurate. Okay? And that should be it. That's your introduction to lists.